silent spiritual fears. After 60, the unspoken truths no one warns you about. I used to be afraid of dying, but now I fear living out the rest of my days without ever knowing who I truly am. I don't fear God's punishment. I fear He's never even heard me call. I don't miss my youth. I just regret living an entire life without ever truly living with my soul. Here's a sorrowful truth, but a truthful one. Growing old isn't just when your body begins to fail, it's when your soul starts knocking, asking to be heard. When you no longer chase deadlines, when the demands of family quiet down. When the night settles in an empty room, you begin to hear another kind of sound. The one that comes from within. Mr. Gerald, 82, once served in the Marines. He survived war, illness, heartbreak, but there's one thing he couldn't conquer every night when the lights go out. He lies in bed, staring at the ceiling, whispering, "Do I still matter when no one says my name anymore?" This spiritual emptiness in the elderly isn't from a lack of faith. It's from a lifetime of believing in something that never truly felt like it belonged to them. Some believed in God as children, but grew up never hearing His voice again. Some chanted sutras and studied Buddhism, but still felt uneasy as if something was missing. And most of them lived between two silences, too afraid to believe and too afraid to let go. Because after 60, the biggest question is no longer, how much longer will I live, but why am I still alive? Who am I really? The collapse doesn't come when the heart stops beating. It comes when the soul is no longer acknowledged, when you wake up each day. Eat on time, take your pills, call your children, but no one ever asks, "How is your spirit today, Mom?" In Taoism, this is when the original spirit begins to withdraw, a signal it's time to return to source. In Christianity, this is when the soul begins to long for real salvation, not just rituals. In Buddhism, this is the start of true insight, when impermanence is no longer a concept but a lived experience. And if you've ever felt like you no longer hold a place in the world, even God goes quiet when you pray, and that dying isn't as scary as leaving this world with no one ever knowing how beautiful your soul truly was, then you are not alone. This journey is for you. The one sitting quietly waiting for a door to open from within. It requires no miracles, no doctrines, only one thing, that you're ready to finally listen to yourself for the first time. And maybe the last, the hidden spiritual fears no one talks about. After 60 births, not everyone fears death, but most elderly people fear this, living a whole life and never knowing what their soul truly wanted. Who am I if no one calls my name anymore? Lucy, 74, used to be a school teacher. She had 3 children. After her husband passed, she moved into a small apartment in Austin, Texas. Each morning she makes tea and reads a few verses from the Bible. But sometimes in the middle of those sacred pages, she pauses and wonders, am I reading because I believe, or because I'm afraid? If I'm no longer a mother, no longer a wife, no longer a teacher, then who am I in God's eyes? That question doesn't bring her to tears out of sorrow, but because she realizes she's never asked herself that. Not once in over 70 years. Fear that your soul is too small to be heard by God. Some people go to church their entire lives yet never ask for anything for themselves because they think God is too busy, because they believe their soul is too small to matter. An old man once whispered, "I've prayed for the world, for this country, for my family, but I've never dared to pray for peace, for me." Buddhism calls this distorted selflessness, when you forget yourself in the name of compassion, until your soul no longer has a place to rest. Judaism says something profoundly honest. If you cannot show mercy to yourself, then your faith in God is hollow. Your soul doesn't need you to be religious. It only asks you to be honest. Fear of dying without forgiving or being forgiven. Mateo, 85, once wept the whole night after hearing a sermon on forgiveness. He told his nurse, I held on to anger toward my son for 40 years. I thought I was right, but now I'm not so sure. So many elderly carry invisible wounds, unspoken apologies, a harsh word that can't be taken back, a loved one who passed before you got to say goodbye. In Taoism, this is called blocked qi energy trapped by unresolved emotions. In Catholicism, it's known as unconfessed sin. In Buddhism, it is karma not yet released. And in every spiritual tradition, there can be no real salvation if the heart isn't at peace. Fear that it's too late to begin again. I'm already 70. What's the point of believing again now? There is a point, and a powerful one. In Christianity, the thief who hung beside Jesus was promised paradise just because he repented in his final breaths. The Buddha once taught, a single moment of sincere awareness at the end of life is worth more than 1,000 years of chanting without awakening. Spirituality doesn't count time, it counts truth. The soul doesn't measure age, it measures awareness. When fear becomes a calling, if you stop running from fear, you'll find it leads somewhere holy. The fear of not knowing who you are anymore can guide you to the truest part of yourself, the you that never got to speak. The fear that God can't hear you can be the first time you sit in silence and begin to listen for your own voice. The burden of unforgiven moments can become your doorway to healing through a word, a tear, or a long overdue hand reaching out. And just when you think it's too late to begin again, that's when God, or Buddha, or your ancestors, or simply your deeper self reaches toward you and says, "Now is exactly the time. Why are you still alive?" Maybe it's to raise your grandchildren. Maybe your journey isn't finished. But maybe, just maybe, you're still here because your soul has never once been truly lived. There's something doctors can't measure. It won't show up in your blood work. It won't appear on an MRI. But every older soul has felt it. It's not quite fear, not quite worry, just a soft, distant unease, as if something important is about to happen and you don't know what it is. Daniel 78 once said, "I'm not in much pain, but lately I feel this emptiness inside, like someone's calling me and I don't know how to answer." It comes in quiet moments. After dinner, when you're alone, when you look into the mirror and don't quite recognize who's looking back. When you cry unexpectedly because an old song hits something deep. When you dream again and again of your childhood home, of your father long gone, of a field that no longer exists. No one teaches us this, but when we reach a certain stillness in age, the soul begins to knock. And it doesn't use words, it speaks in symptoms. In Buddhism, they call it the body reflecting the soul. The body becomes a mirror, and when your spirit holds unspoken burdens, the body begins to speak instead. In Christianity, this is when the Holy Spirit begins to stir, not with thunder, but with a soft whisper. Do you still remember who you are? A shoulder ache with no diagnosis, a heart that beats slower but nothing wrong on the test. That disoriented feeling in the afternoon, even though your mind is still sharp. These things may not belong to science, but they are the very language of the soul. A widow once said, "I dreamed I was floating on water. No voices, no people, but I felt safe." That dream returned again and again. And one day, without ever studying Buddhism, she began to sit still. She didn't chant, she didn't pray, she just breathed. And for the first time in 40 years, she cried not from pain, but because she finally felt light. Your soul doesn't need grand gestures. It doesn't need you to finish the Bible. It doesn't need perfect doctrine. It only needs a space, an empty afternoon, a quiet cup of tea, a gaze into the open sky, and one gentle sentence. "I'm ready to listen to you, my soul." In Taoism, there's a concept called returning qi. When the body begins to weaken, it's not giving up. It's the energy returning to its root. The body begins to loosen, so the soul can appear. If you've ever thought, "I don't have a purpose anymore," then hear this. It's when you do nothing at all that the soul finally finds space to enter. Your body, after decades of work, sacrifice, endurance, and silence, is becoming empty. And in that emptiness, if you're still enough, a soft light begins to rise. You don't have to understand it all, you just have to feel it. Not with logic, but with the quiet hum inside your chest. Because if your soul is knocking, then there is still time to open the door. And if your body is slowing down, this is not a sign of the end. It is a signal, an invitation for the greatest homecoming of your life. Some days you don't know why you're tired. It's not the food, it's not a lack of sleep, it's just a quiet kind of weariness, as if your whole being is pulling inward, as if something inside you is slowly dissolving. One late autumn afternoon, Teresa, 81, called her daughter, just to say, "I'm okay, sweetheart, but it feels like I'm slipping out of myself." Her daughter panicked, thinking her mother meant death, but Teresa clarified, "No, not out of life, out of the roles I've worn for too long. All my life I was the good wife, the selfless mother, the proper citizen, but never just me." And in that moment, when she finally saw the truth, her soul began to speak. Not in words, but in a quiet stream of memories flickering like old film. The time she cried in the bathroom after her husband yelled but hid the pain because a woman shouldn't complain. The moment she watched her son walk out of the house and didn't follow because a mother must teach strength. The years she wanted to paint, to sing, to travel far but didn't, because there's no time left for dreams. In Buddhism, this is called karma awakening, when the energies we never released return to us in our quietest moments. In Christianity, it's the illumination of conscience, when we see our life not through judgment but through tender clarity. In Taoism, it's the return to original spirit, when the soul asks to live in truth before it merges back into the eternal. And you begin to realize, it's not the memories that hurt, it's the silence we've wrapped around them that wounds the deepest. An old man who had been beaten by his father throughout childhood once broke down in tears when he saw his own son yelling at his grandson. He wasn't angry, he wasn't even shocked. He simply said, "My soul was never touched, and now, for the first time, I'm finally touching it with these tears." You don't have to be a monk to heal. You just have to see and not look away, even if what you see is old, a past mistake, a forgotten dream, a hidden longing you were once told was unrealistic. Do you find yourself crying when you see a flower bloom? Do you suddenly want to write again after 30 years of just signing papers? Do you listen to an old song and feel your heart melt like it never aged at all? That's not senility. That's not mental decline. That is your soul blooming again. In Hinduism, there is a quiet teaching. At birth, the soul is a seed. In adulthood, it is a tree. But only near the end of life, if loved, it begins to flower. And if you are at that age now, where your body no longer moves fast, but your eyes hold more stories than any book could tell, then trust this, you are beginning to blossom. No one may see it. No one may applaud it. But you know. Your soul knows. When you're young, you live to prove something. In middle age, you live to fulfill obligations. And in old age, if you're lucky, you live to understand. Not to understand the world, not to understand others, but to understand yourself. To understand why sunsets still make you feel oddly sad. To understand why a single sentence from 40 years ago still echoes inside you. To understand why you've never truly forgiven yourself, even though everyone else already has. As your body slows down, you can no longer run from the parts of you that you once buried. But that's not a curse, that's a gift, a once-in-a-lifetime chance to look back on everything that's happened, not to fix it, just to understand it. Because once you understand, forgiveness comes, love returns, and peace begins to bloom like soft light in the quiet of dusk. You've lived for others your whole life. Now please live for your soul, even if it's only for these final years. My child, listen to the voice inside you. That voice might be from God, from Buddha, from the heavens. Or it might be the very whisper you silenced in childhood, the one that never left. Believe this, if you're still breathing, it's not too late. If you can still feel you're still fully alive, let the rest of your life be the most authentic, honest, and meaningful part. And then something extraordinary happens. You're no longer afraid of dying, because now, you're finally living right. You no longer long for youth. because now you know the deepest truths only bloom in old age. We'll step into a sacred space where late awakenings take form, where recurring dreams begin to speak, where emotions you don't understand show up for a reason, where strange encounters with the past aren't accidents. They're not hallucinations, they're not coincidences. They're your soul leading you back, not with a map, but with remembrance. Some callings can only be heard when the heart is finally quiet. The young have ambition, the old have intuition, but only the old have the chance to realize that this intuition is the voice of the soul. Not everyone receives a moment of spiritual awakening in lightning or thunder. There's no voice from the heavens, no angel in the dream, no blinding sign. For the elderly, awakening often comes like a breeze, quiet, invisible, but unmistakable. Eleanor, 79, shared a dream that kept returning. I was standing in a long hallway, so many doors. Each door was a chapter of my life. I couldn't open them, but one door, there was light coming through, and I knew even without knowing what was behind it that I had to walk through. That wasn't just a dream. That was the soul giving directions. In Sufi tradition, this is called remembering the soul's origin, the moment a person begins to hear the call of home, not their birthplace, but the place the soul truly belongs. Another man, Mr. Wallace, fell one morning in his garden. He lay there motionless, unable to call for help. Later he said, "I wasn't scared, I didn't think of death, I just felt peace." And I knew this wasn't the end of my life. It was the beginning of a different life. From that day, he stopped caring about TV. He avoided meaningless chatter. He no longer feared silence. He began to meditate just 5 minutes a morning. And he started writing down his life story, not for anyone else, but for his own soul to read. Awakening isn't about doing something grand. It's about no longer running from yourself. You'll know you're starting to unlock something inside when you remember small things from long ago and realize they still have something to tell you. You see old trees, clouds, and wind, but they feel brand new. You long to sit still, not out of fatigue, but because being still feels like coming home. An old man once said, with eyes full of quiet tears, "I saw a bird flying, and suddenly, I felt like I was flying with it. In that moment, I realized I am not searching for meaning anymore. I am the meaning." In Buddhism, they call this the arising of inner wisdom, not learned from books, but directly experienced in stillness. In Christianity, this is the gift of illumination, when the Holy Spirit quiets your worldly mind and all that's left is you and God. In Taoism, it's the return of qi to the lower dantian when mind and body unite and your spirit becomes transparent. And the most miraculous part, these signs only come when your soul knows you're ready, even if you don't. A quiet morning, a gentle rain, a bell in the distance, a ray of sun through the curtain, the warmth of a hand holding yours. No one else might call them signs, but your soul knows what they are. My child, it's time to come home. Not to the next world, but back to yourself. Some people spend their whole lives searching for the light. But near the end, they finally realize the light was never out there. It was just behind the wall they built from fear. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of not being enough. Fear that God has forgotten them. Fear of disappointing their parents. Fear they've lived their whole life the wrong way. These fears don't disappear with age. They just get quieter, but deeper, more silent, but more piercing. And then one day, when no one else is calling, when the house is finally still, you begin to hear a whisper. I'm still here, even though you've forgotten me for so long. You don't need to go back and fix the past. You don't have to apologize to everyone you ever hurt. You don't need to explain yourself anymore. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You just need to sit quietly with the part of yourself you left behind. Helena, 83, a retired Catholic school teacher, began reading her evening prayers again after her husband passed. But now she doesn't read them as a duty. She reads them as conversation. Not to plead, not to ask for blessings, just to say, I'm still here, God, and I know you never really left. Maybe you don't believe in God. Maybe you don't go to church. Maybe you're not a Buddhist. Maybe prayer has never felt natural to you. That's okay. Your soul doesn't need a religious label. It just needs your attention the way you'd look at a lost child with tenderness. And when you finally dare to face yourself, truly face yourself without turning away, without blaming, without defending, you'll see the truth. You're not broken. You're just tired. You're just lonely, and you just need to be loved. And that right there is when life finally begins. Not through doing, but through forgiving, letting go, softening, and forgiving not because you're weak, but because you are finally strong enough to stop carrying the past. If you only have a few more years to live, let them be the lightest, deepest, and most meaningful years of your life. Please, don't die inside while you're still alive. There are things we carry our whole lives without ever realizing we're carrying them. A look from your father when you were 8 that made you afraid to be confident. A cold sentence from an old lover that made you unable to love fully again. A mistake no one else knew about but that you've clutched like a cold stone in your chest for decades. When we're young, we push these things aside, too busy to notice. In middle age, we bury them under responsibility. But in old age, when there's no job left, no one else to perform for, they begin to surface. Not to punish, but to be released. Ruth, 76, lost her husband. Her children moved on with their own lives. She lived alone in a small apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. Then came the dreams. Not of loved ones, not of past regrets, just herself. Alone, sitting on a bench again and again. She shared this with tears falling softly. I think that was God, not to say anything, not to judge, just to sit with me, quietly. And from that dream, she began to write. She wrote a letter to her mother who died when Ruth was only 14. She wrote to the daughter she once forced to give up an out-of-wedlock child. She wrote to her 25-year-old self, "You did your best, I forgive you." No one read those letters, but Ruth wrote them. Then she burned them, not to erase, but to send. People don't need to be forgiven by others before they die. They just need to know they've forgiven themselves. The soul doesn't need a reason. It just needs a chance to breathe out. Some people choose meditation, some pray, some simply lie back and listen to music. And in that quiet moment, when no one's watching, when no one marks the time, they breathe softer. Their eyes soften. Their voices shake a little less. Because they have let go. The world thinks letting go is some grand act. But most of the time, letting go happens in silence. An old man, after decades of not speaking to his brother, one day called just to ask, "Do you still remember Mom's bread?" The way it smelled out of the oven. No apology, no argument, just one memory, and that was enough to release it all. An old woman who once forbade her daughter to marry a black man after years of estrangement quietly mailed her biracial grandchild a photo of their mother as a child with a note that read, "I'm sorry it took me so long to understand what love really means." No church bells, no chanting monks, just a small light in the heart. She didn't go to temple. He never returned to church. But their souls were gently wiped clean by one honest act. Letting go doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be true. If there's someone you've never forgiven, write one line. You don't have to send it. If there's someone you loved and never said it, to close your eyes, whisper their name. If there's a moment you still feel ashamed of, sit with it. Like an old friend resting beside you. You may not have much time left, but you have more space now than you've ever had. Space in your heart to light a candle. Not for anyone else, for yourself. Not because you're perfect, but because you deserve peace. Not because you've repaid every wrong, but because no one was born to die carrying regret. Your soul is not lost, it's not broken, it's not too late. It's simply been forgotten. And now it's time to return. Not to fix, not to change the past, not to fix anyone else. Just to say one small thing. I hear you now, and I'm sorry. And in that single moment where the pain doesn't vanish, where the body is still old, still tired, still aching, a light begins to glow. From within, from a place only you can reach. No one teaches us how to believe again when we've lost faith for a very long time. Faith is fragile. It doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes slowly, with each unanswered prayer, each loss that never made sense. Each time we saw the good suffer, while the cruel prospered. Each time we stood at a loved one's coffin, and heaven said nothing. People still go to church, still bow before Buddha, still light incense for their ancestors, but inside, they no longer believe the way they used to. Some believe out of fear, fear of sin, fear of hell, fear of karma. Some believe out of habit because they were taught to, because everyone else does. But believing with the heart, believing through real connection, not for reward, not to avoid punishment. Very few still carry that kind of faith after 60. Luther, an elderly black man in Alabama, had been a pastor for 30 years. But after his wife died of cancer, he left the church, left the Bible, stopped praying. He said, "I wasn't angry at God, I just had nothing left to say to him." Each morning he sat alone on a wooden bench behind his house, drinking tea, listening to birds, and being silent. That silence lasted 3 years, until one morning a small bird landed on his hand. Just for a few seconds, then it flew away. But in those seconds he cried. He didn't know why. He just felt his heart soften. And for the first time in 3 years he whispered, "Lord, I'm still here, and if you're still there, I'm ready to listen." Faith didn't return through ritual. It came through a moment when his heart opened again. No scriptures, no monks, no sacred names required. Just one truth. You are not completely alone. Maribel, once a Buddhist nun, had left the temple years ago. After a near-fatal accident, she woke up in a hospital bed alone. No family, no friends, no prayers. Just her and the slow spin of the ceiling fan. She recalled, "I didn't know who to call. I had no one. But I knew. I was not just this body, and I knew something was still holding me here." No one told her that. No book taught her that. But she knew. From that day on, she stopped calling it God or Buddha or heaven. She simply called it the light. Each morning she spoke to it. Not to beg, not to ask, just to share. "Today I laughed for real. Today I forgave myself a little. Today I lived like a child, not knowing much, but finding everything beautiful." Faith is not handed down from above. It blooms from within when you've heard enough, emptied enough, and become open enough. No two people find faith the same way. Some through scriptures, some through silence, some through tears, some just by watching the rain fall. And suddenly they realize, something has been holding me even when I let go of myself. No religion owns the light, no path owns the way home. Because home is not a temple, it's not a doctrine, it's the moment you finally sit down, stop running, and realize you are still worthy of love. No need to explain, no need to prove, just sit and breathe. And in that breath, faith returns. Not faith in a person, or a prophet, or a promise, but faith in love, the love that never left you. One day you wake up and realize your body is no longer yours. The hand holding your teacup isn't steady. It takes 2 deep breaths just to get out of bed. And the face in the mirror looks unfamiliar, old, yes, but with eyes that still carry light. You're not afraid, you're just quiet. Not sad, not joyful, just aware that you're standing near an edge, but not the edge of destruction, the edge of something unnamed. Carl, 88, lived in a nursing home in Vermont. He wasn't terminally ill, he just knew. One morning he woke up earlier than usual, put on an old suit, combed his hair, wrote a few lines in his notebook, and sat on the porch all day. That night he passed away. No pain, no struggle, just complete. The nurse found the note he left behind. It wasn't a will, no instructions, just one sentence. "Thank you for letting me live long enough to learn how to let go." No one teaches you how to die, but if you've truly lived, death will no longer be frightening. The preparation doesn't happen in the hospital. Not through breathing tubes or final checklists. It happens in small things. Forgiving an old friend silently in your heart. Giving a gift for no reason. Saying good morning slowly as if it might be the last. Eating a meal slowly, chewing each grain of rice with gratitude as if it were breath itself. You don't know how much time you have, but you can know whether your soul has begun to feel lighter. Rose, once terrified of dying, so scared she couldn't sleep alone, began journaling to her soul, and slowly she began to sleep again. One night she woke up crying, not from fear, but because she had dreamed of her mother holding her hand as they walked together. That morning she wrote, "I'm not afraid anymore, Mama. If death means walking with you again, then I'm ready." No sermon comforts like a dream. No ceremony is more sacred than the moment you realize your heart has nothing left to hold on to. Dying is not the end, it's the return. To God if that's who you trust. To the Buddha if that's who brings you peace. To the light if you no longer need a name. To your mother who passed. To the father who once cradled you. To the partner waiting on the other side of the rainbow. Or simply to peace. No one knows for sure what happens after the heart stops beating. But you can know what's happening inside your heart before that moment comes. And if your heart is softened, if you feel light, free from regret, free from anger, free from clinging, then whatever lies ahead, dead, will be made of light. You were born crying. Try to leave this world on a quiet breath. You lived your life trying to please everyone else. Let your death be a gift to your own soul. Not so others will pity you. Not so others will grieve dramatically. But so that one day when your name is spoken, someone will say, "She left like someone who had just finished a beautiful poem." Aging is not the end. It is the most sacred homecoming of a lifetime. There comes a morning when you no longer collect the newspaper from the porch, no longer turn on the radio, no longer rush your coffee. You simply sit, not because you're tired, not because you're sad, but because you finally know. Life isn't found in doing something. It's found in no longer needing to. You don't need to try anymore. Don't need to pretend to be cheerful. Don't need to hide your wrinkles or your forgetfulness. You just need to be here. Sit, breathe. Touch the wound in your chest this time without judgment. Revisit an old memory and this time smile. Not because it was beautiful, not because you were right, but because it was yours and you lived through it with everything you had. There's no applause, no spotlight, just a soft ray of light coming through a window at day's end, falling on your face as you finally hold yourself with all that's ever been broken. You once thought living meant leaving something behind, an achievement, a successful child, a book, a lesson for the world. But now you understand. Living is becoming a quiet place where your soul can safely rest. You don't need to be remembered forever. Just once in a single moment by someone who, when they think of you, feels peace. You don't need to be called great, only real. If there's anything worth taking with you when you leave this world, it's not wealth, not titles, not reputation. It's this, one moment of loving someone without regret. One moment of forgiving someone who once hurt you. One moment standing in sunlight, finding beauty in everything, for no reason at all. And above all, one moment, just one, when you lived as if you were truly worthy of being alive. If you've made it to the end of this story, through the pages of your life, through the aches, through the memories, and you're still here, then please, be still for a moment longer. Do nothing. Just breathe, as if you just set down a backpack you've carried for 60 years. As if you just spoke a truth you've held half your life. As if you just came back to yourself whole, even with the cracks. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you live, who you're with, or what shape your health is in. I only know this. If you've come with me this far, you are brave. Brave enough to hear what most people avoid. Brave enough to look at every piece of your story, even the ones you tried to hide. Brave enough to accept that aging is not the end, but your last chance to come home fully. And if you are still breathing, then the light is still waiting for you. Not far away, not out there. Inside you right now and always. You're listening to The Life After 60. We don't offer miracles. We simply help relight the flame so you can see what was never lost. If this story touched you, share it not for numbers, but so one more soul might find its way back home.